Okay, so this piece is a really high-energy political commentary, basically celebrating the new Japanese PM Sane Taki and Trump's visit, framing their alliance and policies like the mass deportations as this huge win for the right against inferior cultures and globalism.
Right, a very strong statement of intent there. But straight away, you hit this kind of dilemma the piece sets up for itself.
Which is?
Well, how effective can the actual message be if the way it's delivered is, fundamentally hostile?
Yeah, that's true. It makes a big case for total political dominance, calls it a diabolical W. But the way it argues for that win is just overwhelmingly aggressive, almost right from the start.
And that brings us right into our first main critique. The highly polarized and aggressive language really keeps overshadowing the actual policy points being made, which limits how effective it can be for anyone not already, fully on board.
Yeah, the writer's clearly going for maximum impact, but all the extreme hyperbole, the slurs, the ad hominem stuff, calling critics fucking retard radical leftist Islamist, or labeling groups pro-rape people.
Right.
It just tanks the credibility they're trying to build up elsewhere with specific stats.
And the weakness there is really tactical, isn't it? I mean, if the goal is only to fire up the existing base, maybe it works great.
Sure.
But that tone, it throws up this immediate wall for anyone else. So if the writer actually wants to persuade someone, or even just document this political shift for a maybe skeptical reader.
Or just make a factual case for the win.
Exactly. Boiling down complex arguments to just name-calling is just counterproductive.
It feels like the commentary leads with outrage, Instead of letting the evidence, the policy shifts, speak for themselves. So if the author dials back that aggression, do they lose the energy, that sort of passion that defines the style?
It's a trade-off, yeah, but I think it yields a better result overall. So the suggestion for improvement here is pretty straightforward. Recenter the commentary on the facts you're presenting, the policy outcomes. Let the data and the events, even the really controversial ones, carry the weight of the argument instead of just relying on, inflammatory labels for emphasis.
Okay.
I mean, the sheer force of Taki's deportation policy, or those huge trade deals you mentioned, that should provide the energy. That's the victory, not the nasty adjectives thrown at the opposition.
That feels like a tough adjustment, though, without watering down the author's, clear anti-globalist stance. Can we maybe give some concrete examples? How could they make that shift but keep the intensity?
Absolutely. Let's take the language used for PM Taki herself. We see terms like brand new bitch, female Hitler, far-right lady.
Yeah, pretty charged.
Very. So to ground the win in actual policy, swap those labels out for more neutral descriptions of her position or goals. Maybe something like a leader focused on immediate mass deportations and strict border action.
Okay.
Or, the prime minister implementing a radical shift in national policy. That grounds the win in measurable stuff, policy outcomes, not just personality insults.
And what about the opposition? I mean, the piece spends a lot of rhetorical energy just insulting them direct. Is there a way to critique the ideology without, alienating every single reader who doesn't already agree with the harshest labels?
Well, if the author wants to critique the ideology, they should critique the ideology, right?
Right.
So replace terms like leftoids, retards, or dumb fuck censorship women's groups. Replace those with more objective terms like critics, opponents, or maybe the progressive opposition.
So it forces the focus onto the substance.
Exactly. It forces the reader to focus on the critique of the stance, rather than just recoiling from the, frankly, dehumanizing language aimed at the person. The core message, the critique of their policies, that'll land much harder if the speaker maintains some level of, perceived objectivity.
Okay, so the goal is really to make the argument more shareable, more defensible. And if they address the tone, they've got to make sure that policy focus is backed up by solid data, right? Which brings us to the economic claim.
Yeah, let's look at those next. The material describes what sounds like huge success, especially around the alliance with Trump.
It definitely asserts a powerful feeling of success. Yeah.
But that leads us right to the second big area where the piece could be stronger. The sweeping claims of economic and political success are laid out with immense confidence, but they often lack the specific, citable details or evidence needed to really nail down their size or source.
I noticed that too. It asserts these massive, transformative wins, PM Taki getting a $500 billion deal, Toyota putting auto plants all over the United States, this big minerals deal.
But we don't get the source, do we? Or the official mechanism, or any real context for those figures.
No.
And that's a critical weakness because it reduces what should be significant, verifiable developments. It reduces them to just enthusiastic claims, not grounded, solid analysis.
Right. If these deals are really these diabolical W's that opponents supposedly can't dispute,
then they need to be traceable, documented wins, not just, excited bullet points.
because the whole argument kind of hinges on this idea that the alliance is causing a massive boom in jobs and investment.
Exactly.
And without verifiable sources, the easy counter is just, oh, that's just propaganda, which totally defeats the purpose of citing facts in the first place.
Precisely. The weakness is that gap between the excitement and the actual evidence. So the suggestion here is to anchor those policy successes with verifiable, contextual data about the trade deals, their projected impact, bridge that gap between the confidence and the concrete proof.
Turn the shout into a citation, basically.
You got it. That validates the claim that the author's side is definitively winning.
Okay, so can we unpack those claims a bit? Give some concrete examples of how to verify them. Give them the weight they need.
Sure. Let's start with the trade deals. Specify the details, like what is the minerals deal? Is it rare earths for specific industries, like cars or fighter jets, as it sort of hints?
Right, be specific.
And that huge $500 billion number for investments in America needs context. Is that a guaranteed figure? Is it an estimate over 5 years? Is it the total value of assets being moved? Give the reader the source. Maybe cite a government release, a corporate announcement.
Something tangible.
Yeah, something that lets them share the win confidently and makes it harder to just dismiss out of hand.
And the Toyota commitment? That's presented as a huge part of the job boom claim, promising plants across the U.S.
That is a headlined claim, definitely. So when citing Toyota's commitment, provide the necessary context. Was it a verbal promise made in a private meeting? Or was it a signed contract announced publicly, a projected investment figure from the CEO? If you can quantify the potential impact, like estimated job numbers or specific states where plants might go.
Ah, okay.
That underscores the massive boom of jobs claim way more effectively than just saying a promise was made. A win feels much bigger when it's grounded in facts that opponents can't easily just wave away as hype.
Right. That focuses the enthusiasm into something verifiable, empirical. Okay. Now, the third critique tackles what's maybe the most provocative part of the whole piece, the argument about inferior cultures.
Yeah.
And this really needs the highest level of rigor, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. When you make assertions that consequential, the need for a rigorous framework is just paramount. And here, the most provocative arguments, the existence of inferior cultures, it relies pretty much exclusively on shocking, selective social statistics without giving us a coherent definitional framework to actually support that broad cultural judgment.
Yeah. The material uses these incredibly severe social outcomes, like the 99.4% sexual assault stat in Egypt, age of consent of 9 in Iraq, the Madani example about not intervening due to cultural relativism, uses them as sort of irrefutable proof.
But the weakness is that the argument kind of stops there, at the shock value of the numbers.
Right.
And crucially, it doesn't set up objective, transferable criteria for comparison. You need a consistent scorecard, right? If we're judging a whole culture, we need to know the rules of the game. Otherwise, the argument just looks selective, like it's only using the worst examples to prop up a conclusion it already decided on, rather than being systematically analyzed.
That's a tough constraint for this kind of high-intensity commentary, though. Setting up objective, transferable criteria for that kind of judgment. It sounds almost impossible to do in a short piece and keep the punchiness.
It's difficult, yeah. But it's necessary if you want to be credible on this point. So the suggestion for improvement is to strengthen this thesis. The piece really has to establish clear, objective, and transferable criteria for cultural assessment, and then apply those standards consistently across the different examples it uses.
Like what kind of criteria?
Well, for instance, maybe adherence to baseline UN human rights standards, or the legal protection offered to women and minors. State tolerance for, say, violently enforced practices. The argument needs to define what the acceptable floor is for any functioning moral culture, you know?
Okay, that would definitely shift the argument from just a list of shocking grievances to something more like a structured analysis. How could they implement that framework concretely?
while still keeping the author's intent clear.
Okay, let's use the comparison the author makes internally, the reference to historical American culture and slavery.
Right.
The author needs to be clear. Is the critique about a historical practice that the culture later rejected? Or is the author defining the current national culture by its past failures? Clarifying that distinction helps define the scope of the critique being applied elsewhere. Are we judging current legal tolerance or historical sin? Makes a big difference.
And the Zoran Mandani example that's used to really indict cultural relatives seems key here.
It is key. So, to reinforce that critique, the piece needs to explicitly define the cultural elements Mandani was supposedly prioritizing over intervening against rape, according to the reported rationale.
What was the reported rationale again?
He reportedly cited concern about intervening as like a well-meaning foreigner, which overrode his instinct to help.
Ah, okay.
So the piece needs to frame that specific rationale much more clearly to really land the judgment that follows. These are the people that say there aren't inferior cultures. By laying out the purported standard being used, the relative standard, the subsequent judgment about pro-rape people feels logically derived from that inaction, rather than just, purely emotional name-calling.
Gotcha. These suggestions are pretty powerful because they actually ground the most radical points in the commentary, enhances the rhetorical effectiveness, makes it more defensible against skeptics. It moves the discussion from just pure reaction to, more robust analysis.
The inherent controversy isn't going to disappear, obviously, but the material's ability to actually defend its conclusions and maximize its persuasive impact, that will dramatically increase.
Okay, that brings us towards the end of this critique then. We've highlighted, 3 crucial steps for really maximizing the piece's effectiveness? First, maybe ease off the accelerator on the personal insults. Adjust the highly polarized tone so it doesn't automatically alienate people.
Right.
Second, back up those really significant economic claims with verifiable data, context. Show the work. And third, build a sturdy, logical framework for that really challenging inferior cultures argument. Define the terms.
Exactly. These are all, I think, highly actionable suggestions. They're designed to strengthen the material's internal logic and its external credibility without necessarily compromising the core message or the political intensity. By making these changes, the author can really transform that enthusiasm into robust, defensible, and ultimately much more impactful commentary.
So we definitely encourage the listener to implement these suggestions, focus on turning those big claims into unassailable facts, and maybe clarify the basis for the cultural judgments. And we'd be thrilled to review the revised work for a follow-up critique.
Absolutely. Send it back our way. Until next time.